Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today, we're going to have a really excellent baseball conversation, life conversation. Baseball, as I always say, is life, but it's also a lot more important when you get through life's challenges that you come through. And today's guest, Michael, has really come through some challenges. And even though he played for the Boston Red Sox organization, we'll still allow him on. How you doing this morning,
I'm
Michael?
doing well, thank you. And just to let you know, I'm a mercenary, so I'd have played for anybody, so
Yep. No, I hear you. When they offer you, I tried out for a couple of teams and I didn't get picked.
yeah,
I was slow even when I was young. So there really wasn't a whole lot. I had a good glove, but that was sort of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But so you've had an interesting story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then that way, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, so yeah, like as you mentioned, I was a baseball player. That was like my identity growing up. I think I was, one of those kids at an early age that, was meant to be a baseball player. I got a scholarship early to the University of California, Berkeley, and then eventually my junior year in college, I got drafted by the Boston Red Sox. And then during my second professional season, I suffered an arm injury that ultimately ended my career. And after an unsuccessful surgery, I turned to painkillers and into opiates as a solution. And then the height of my addiction that eventually progressed to heroin, I was diagnosed with a medulloblastoma, a brain tumor slightly smaller than a tennis ball, and I had to have, side effect. I had to have multiple surgeries, chemotherapy, radiation, really bad side effects to all that. And this process that I'm in now it's a journey of self-discovery. I'm 5 years sober now, off all medications, and and I'm trying to share my story to help other people because I mentioned that yeah, I had this devastating injury and then I turned to opiates as a solution. But I wasn't addicted to my addict behavior began long before that. Baseball was my first addiction. It became the source of getting the things that I wanted, attention and validation. And throughout my life, there's this pattern of needing something for something, right? Never finding that self-worth from within. I needed something outside of me to find motivation or to help me. So yeah, that's just a small gist of my story. I'm a speaker now. I wrote my book just came out recently, and like I said, I'm trying to share my story to people that are going through challenging times.
Yeah, a lot of times with people who use substances are trading one for the other, but you also it wasn't really that you just traded baseball for opiates. It was you were at a top level playing. I mean, even just to be drafted by a team, so it wasn't but the sudden change of getting so close to a dream that you had to
Yeah.
you know how'd you manage that? Was it only through substances and opioids?
Yeah, pretty much. I didn't manage it very well. I think especially from an early age, and you hear a lot of addicts talk about this. I felt like I had a hole inside of me that something was missing and something that I tried to fill with everything. And it's a God-shaped hole. I know that now because that need for more or that need for is infinite and right. And the only thing really for me that can fill that is God because it's infinite. But I didn't know this at the time. And so when I found baseball, it was like my higher power. It was something that filled that hole because the better that I performed and the more better that I did, the more that attention and validation that I got. But it just it filled it, but it would empty out, and it needed more of it. It needed more of it. Needed more of it. Needed more of it. And then eventually, and all the times where, and this is plagued throughout my career, is because times that I got hurt where I would seek that validation off the field by partying and chasing women and that was my big problem is that I felt like I was destined for greatness but I was never willing to do the things that
Mm.
I needed to do to be truly great because I was always caught up in the distractions because my main thing was finding that self-worth and validation from outside of myself, and so if I couldn't get it on the field I would find it elsewhere. And so yeah, so when I lost when I learned that I could at 23 years old, I learned that I can no longer throw the way that I once did, or I can no longer play my sport competitively. I lost that higher power. I lost that sense of that kept everything manageable. It kept my drinking manageable, kept everything manageable. But when I lost that, then I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to numb myself and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what happens often. I was a certified recovery peer recovery advocate, so I'm very familiar with the recovery. That was one of the things that attracted me to your story is that, we get into those positions. One of the images that they show of people who use substances, they always show you the spoon, the needle, and all those things,
Yeah.
but they don't really talk about the pills as much. And like where I live now is in Massapequa, New York.
Okay.
And that was at one point the number one overdose death capital of the United States. And it
Oh,
wasn't because of needles or anything like that. It was the opioid medicines,
yeah.
the painkillers and what people do with it. Because when you're in pain, anybody doesn't want to be in pain, right? And most
Yeah.
people want to avoid that. And especially when you're having a life transition where
Yeah.
you thought you were working towards that ultimate external, but it really, I heard you say, when did you start finding that internal, that it all comes from inside, the pain that you were feeling inside, that you were just finding solutions from the outside?
Yeah, when did I start to build that self-worth up from the inside? Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, I think well, I wish I could take credit for it. I think what had to happen for me is I had to have a couple spiritual experiences where I finally, realized, what a selfish jerk that I am. And I could finally see my own actions and my own the way that I did things through the eyes of other people. And once I did that, once I started to feel that, and then I started to take I started to get truly honest with myself, right? Because when I was in that precipice of change, I was full of so much anger and blame, right? I was mad at God, I was mad at baseball, I was mad, I'm just mad at the world, and I think the truth was, and that why I went through these ups and downs of addiction so long is because I was really just mad at myself,
Mm.
right? Because I was avoiding the part inside me that was the truth, because it was buried so deep under layers of denial. The truth was is that all the bad things that happened to me that were in my life were my fault. They were products of the choices that I made. Like I blamed the Red Sox for my arm and for releasing me, but I was the one that was abusing my medication or going out and partying and pulling all-nighters instead of focusing on my rehabilitation, right? I ruined my arm, not the Red Sox. I blame God for my brain cancer when I was the one that, in my desperation to fix my arm after the doctors told me that I could never throw right again, I was the one that went and bought human growth hormone and other anabolic steroids from a shady source and misuse them without any medical supervision, right? I was most likely causing my brain tumor. Like I gave myself brain cancer, not God, right? And when I started to accept these things and not to approve of them or not to look down on them, but just to acknowledge that they happen, and I couldn't change it. I could only do better in the future, right? And then once I did that, and I started to learn how to manage my pain, like you just mentioned earlier, right? It's when I'm in uncontrollable pain, I only think about myself, right? And pain can be depression, it can be mental, physical. I had to learn how to manage these things. And then once I did that, then I started to get some discipline in my life. And discipline is the only way how I build my self-worth from the inside out, because I create little small wins every day. Whatever that routine may be, whether it be a discipline of my mind or my body, it doesn't matter. But once I do that, then I don't have to seek the approval of other people. Then I don't have to seek things outside of myself, like drugs or anything. It comes from within.
Yeah, it's those habits that you start building.
Yeah.
Could you
Yeah.
share some of those habits that you found that have been helpful for you?
Yeah. So exercise, obviously, and a lot of those things, like once, just to backtrack a little bit, a lot of these things, once I started to change that perspective and take personal responsibility, I start to see not what I lost from baseball, but what I've gained. Right,
Mm.
that's the most important thing, is what I've gained, not what I've lost. And I gained a lot of those habits from baseball: the weight training, the visualizing, the meditation, the writing. I started writing. One of the habits I had to make was write, because I was so ungrateful, and I had to just to decondition an ungrateful mind. And how I did that is by writing gratitude lists every morning and writing, and that habit of writing and journaling eventually ended up leading me into writing a book, right? So there's some habits like that where, just like I said, exercising, reading, writing. I got a piano, you can see it behind me.
Yeah.
I suck at playing music, but I got one just to create a little habit to help my brain. Just all these little things that I did that I didn't do in the past, because I was so one dimensional with baseball my entire life. I didn't know who I was without it, right? So I created all these little habits and routines. Early, I wake up every day at 5 a.m. No matter what, no matter what day it is of the week. Those creating little routines where I'm having some success just to start the day is so important for me.
Yeah, no, you have to set yourself up, and like even with piano playing, you have to be prepared to be really bad at something if you want to get good, right?
Yeah,
Like the first time you might have been more of a natural with baseball, but all the
yeah,
other things that you did, so even writing probably wasn't comfortable at the beginning, and when you dive into yourself and have to kind of look at some of those hard lessons that we
yeah,
learn, right? We always get the test first, and the lesson comes afterwards.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, you're right. I mean, well, I was better at writing than I was at playing the freaking piano back here because I still suck at that. I still suck at that. But I mean, I was always a good BSer, so writing kind of came naturally to me, you know. But no, you're right. I wasn't, and yeah. So I had to. I think I think in the past I was so afraid to try new things because I was afraid of to fail, right? I was afraid of rejection, I'm afraid of not being good enough, afraid of just not, I avoided things that I wasn't good at because I didn't want to look bad. Right. But who am I looking bad to? Right. Is it that's the perspective that changes, right? The meter that changes, that do I care what everybody else thinks, or is it about what I think and how I feel and accepting me for me? And so once I realized that, once you have so many failures in a row, you learn that, that the failures actually teach you the most about yourself. And then once you realize that the worst thing that can happen is you learn something, then you're not afraid to fail and try new things and experiment and mess up. And I think that was a big revelation for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Learning how to fail forward, they
Yeah.
call it, is so important
Like a
because
politician, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I mean, right, a lot of the politicians, right, they lost a bunch of times at
Yeah.
the beginning, and then they
Yeah.
found really what they need to do. You got to get your
Yeah.
footsteps. So your footsteps, I always like when people bring God into it. Is
Yeah.
so how did you find your faith? Because when you're in that darkness, you really it's almost counterproductive to like look for that God in that. You think there's something external that's a lot more than God.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, I grew up going to church, and then once you start playing travel baseball,
Yeah,
on the weekends, church is gone. And I didn't going throughout this my baseball career and then the addiction and the cancer. I wouldn't say that I was an atheist. I'm more of an agnostic, where I was open to the idea of believing in something, but I just didn't. I didn't believe in the traditional sense of religion, religious God, the one that you hear every day. I didn't, and I didn't find it. You would think, after getting small percentages to live in my life and being in the hospital, that I would have found God, but I didn't. I didn't pray. I didn't care. I wasn't like I said. I was mad at God, and I think going back to what I was saying earlier about seeing the spiritual experiences, seeing myself, and I had these. And it's hard to explain because it's not just like a burning bush moment. It's these moments that happened to me that I couldn't explain, that the synchronicities of just
yeah,
of these things that were just placed, and that there's something that just had to, it was so blatantly in my face that just wasn't a coincidence. And I think being in recovery early on, and not even the times where I was in recovery and I didn't get anything out of it, really, you're introduced to the idea of God. You need to surrender, or those kind of things. So I had that in my mind, but I just got all these things happen to me in a row that were just um were I couldn't explain them. And it was so much so that I thought I was going crazy. You know what I mean? I thought, and I had to
yeah.
have like I had to have like a psychotic breakthrough, an experience, and I write about it a lot in my book, where I had to then realize, hey, you know what? It's not somebody watching you or this and that. It's actually, it is God doing for you what you haven't been able to do for yourself. And then when I realized that, then I started to see, how God has always been working in my life, that I just really was chosen never to see it, right? Because I always wanted to take control. I always wanted to do things my way. I always wanted to be in charge, but the truth is I'm not, and I had to let that go. And obviously, as a big time athlete or whatever it may be, it's hard to accept a word like surrender. You don't want to
Yeah.
surrender. It's hard, but I had to let go and to accept that, you know what, I don't really know much, and that's okay. I mean, sure, I've accrued some wisdom, but I don't really know that much, and I've been wrong about everything from the tooth fairy to what I wanted to do with my life. I've been wrong about everything, and you know what? That's not a bad thing. It's okay. Somebody else can worry about all that stuff because I can't control it. So I can only just focus on the things here now within me that I can control. How I respond to things, how I, how I clean my side of the street, how I talk to strangers, how I influence the environment around me. That's all that I can control, and everything else is just I don't have to worry about that stuff. And all those things kind of happen together with me, and yeah, it's hard, and I've come to believe in a power greater than myself that of my understanding that ironically I don't understand, and that's okay. I don't have to understand it. I just have to have faith in it. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree because, I always go, that's where the bad comes in a little bit differently. What I'm like, God nudges us, right?
yeah,
Acts anonymously and then brings us along the path. And if you don't listen the first time, gets
yeah.
harder and harder. And for you, so you think you've given or you have, of the brain surgery, the brain tumor was because of the anabolic steroids and
I
the
think so. There's a lot more to it in that sense. But back to your question, I was like, God beat me with that bat down into the ground a
Yep.
million times, so before I was ready to listen. But yeah, no, I think so because I before I didn't know I had the type of tumor that I had was extremely rare in adults. It happens mostly in children, the medulloblastoma, and so I had some history in my family of that type of tumor that I didn't know about, and also it was the size of nearly size of a tennis ball. So that tumor had to have been growing in
For a long time.
my whole life, or it had to be coming very rapidly, very fast. And I
Mm.
had gotten brain scans done in college, a few years before my diagnosis, and I had nothing there. So I know that. So I'm sure, smoking heroin on tinfoil and other things that I was doing didn't really help that process either. But I definitely think that was part of it. That and that's the whole the message, is that I my actions, my selfishness, my disease caused that in me, and yeah, and that's how I have to live with it, and a daily reminder of all the permanent side effects that I have.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful that you take that responsibility. And I mean, there's obviously other people who've gone and don't have that, but you've taken that message, that learning, and really, turn the adversity into something that's a lot more living in gratitude. And you wrote a book about it.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to learn in gratitude. I think the most important thing is, I have to uh accept me as a flawed human being that I am, and then internally then I can accept you for you, and then I live in the world that's outside of me. And I think being of service to others and helping other people is the most important thing that I can do because it helps me the most. And yeah, I wrote a book about it. It's called The Disease of Me, and I say that because we all hear that addiction is a disease, and it is in ways, and there's science behind it and all that, but I don't believe that my addiction is the disease. I believe I'm the disease because my addict behavior began long before my drugs or alcohol, and for me, drugs and alcohol are a symptom of my disease, because if you can take drugs and alcohol out of my life and I'm still left with all these character defects, I'm still selfish, I'm still a jerk, I'm still all of these things. And even 5 years sober, I still go through all these things, and I still have all these mental struggles, but I have to work hard on myself, on a daily basis, to remind myself of the consequences of my actions, and to try to live in gratitude every day. So yeah, I mean, my ultimate goal with all of this is to take that personal responsibility, to like you said, and that authenticity of to take it and then to share it, because it was hard for me. I had to be completely broken, physically, mentally, and spiritually, before I was able to admit that and to be willing to accept that. So, and it's not easy for everybody. I get that
No,
more than
not at
anything.
all.
And not everybody has a tennis ball sized brain tumor. You know what I mean? Not everybody has to have those experiences, and I get that. But if I can just share my story in that way, and still look the part, and knowing from where I came from with baseball, that it can happen to anybody, I think that message can be shared.
Yeah, no, 100% because not everybody, and everybody has their own story. So,
Yeah.
it's how we get there that really kind of brings us to that message. And the fact that you brought it, You know, when we're dealing with substances and things like that, everybody deals with it differently. And but you were able to in 5 years, man. That congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you.
That's a major accomplishment. You know, again, I have a recovery background, so
Yeah.
I know. You know, I've sat with a lot of people over the years, and it just isn't easy because, as you said, life will still come and life at
Yeah.
you, and no matter
Yeah.
what you do, it's easier to stay in that ashes versus keep building yourself. So how do you
Yeah.
know? So with your success in recovery and your book, how'd you get to writing the book?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I started out as a motivational. I wanted to be a motivational speaker, right? Because I had in recovery, you're asked to speak at meetings sometimes or at
Yeah.
treatment centers. And at a year of sobriety, I was asked to speak. And I thought, how hard could it be, right? I'm speaking in front of a couple hundred people. I used to pitch in front of thousands of people. You know what I mean? How hard could this be? And so I got up there and I sucked. You know what I mean? I was like, had a frog in my throat. I was like, man, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. But afterwards, I had people come up to me and tell me how much they could relate to my story, how much it helped them, and that felt good too. But I also, there's something about, when you're playing baseball in front of lots of people, you're performing, you're showing the best of yourself, you're showing you want to show you how elite you are, and you're trying to, dominate the opponent, and in this prism of, like, of greatness. Whereas when I'm speaking and I'm sharing my story, I'm not like the rah guy of, I'm gonna manifest your life into this beautiful, I'm
You're talking
sharing
about your broken
I'm
the
sharing the
story.
worst things that happen to me. I'm sharing the most vulnerable things because I want to relate to you onto a level that you understand, in a sense where that it's okay to have these thoughts, it's okay to have these things, it's okay to mess up, it's okay to fail. How do we move forward, and how do we live in the gray that is our life, not the highs and lows, because the gray is where we live, spend most of our time. And so that's not easy to do, right? It's hard to speak and share your dirty laundry in front of a bunch of strangers. I didn't realize how hard that was. But what it did, after I was done, after I got that compliments, is it gave me the desire to get better at something, right? To get, and that I hadn't felt that in a long time. And so I decided I'm going to be the speaker. And how do you want to be a motivational speaker? What do you do? I was moved to a new area. I'm from California, and now I'm in Ohio, and I didn't know anybody. So I started to look at people who had success in the industry, and a lot of people, a lot of these speaking bureaus and things were, asking me if I had a book, or this guy said a book, and I'm like, oh, well, crap, I got to write a book now.
Hmm.
So, but I'd always thought in my mind that I had a good story, and I'd taken notes a lot. So I thought, hey, I'm gonna write this book. And when I started to do it, those were my initial motivations. And then, like you mentioned earlier, like that healing process of going through all of that, and just what it turned into. And I really put a lot into it, and I put my soul into it, and I get honest in a way that I hadn't got honest before, even when I speak. And it was just something that it kind of just went. I felt like, again, God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, and sharing that, because I think a big part of recovery, this is like the steps, and sharing, you know um taking accountability, and things like that. And sharing it on paper. That's just, it's such a healing process, and that's what it was for me.
Yeah, no, sure. Owning your own process and owning your voice. I mean, I'm a speaker and I work with a lot of speakers. So, owning your voice and your story becomes so much more powerful. You know,
Yeah.
moving past the victimhood or the things that have happened to you that might have set you back to turn it into something a little bit more promising. That if one person could hear you
Yeah.
differently, that's where you get to that next level.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, it's a way for me to hold myself accountable, in a sense, because when I speak and I share these messages, I talk about the things that I do and the actions that I take, and for me to be, one thing that I've learned, like I said earlier, and this is a self discovery. This is all a self discovery mission that I've been on, right? After all this, and the thing that I value most, besides time, obviously time is the most important thing we have, but second thing I value most is authenticity,
Mhm.
right? Is being the real me, because I was always afraid to be the real me. That's why I always use substances and hide, and because but now being the real me is the most important thing. So if I'm out there talking and speaking, and I have to be practicing what I preach. You know, I have to be, if I'm saying something, I better believe that I'm doing it on my own in my own time. And when I was playing baseball and after I got hurt, I would coach and teach lessons, and I spent, you know, countless hours just living a lie, like not practicing what I preach and just taking, Adderall or painkillers just to be able to function every day, because I was so hollow on the inside. Because when you live that way, it eats at you. And
Sure.
so, I need to be able, if I'm doing something, I'm gonna be authentic and I'm gonna do it. I have to be practicing what I preach, and that's the only way I feel like I can connect to people is if I'm doing it myself. And I just think that's so important. If I get to a point where I'm doing this and I'm spitting out BS, I'm gonna quit. So
Yeah, you gotta be that authentic self, and because if you're fooling the audience, that just doesn't feed you. I mean, it's like eating Oreos, right? It's
yeah,
like, yeah, it feels good when it goes down, but after a while, you're like, man, that wasn't the
no,
best choice I had.
no, no, yeah, you're right.
So now you feed yourself a lot. I mean, 5 years of sobriety is and what is your pattern? What's some of your secret sauce in terms of success in that way?
Yeah, I think, and it's hard. It's hard. I think, like I said, the most important thing is I had to accept me for me. Once I've done that, then I can realize the patterns in my life, right? The patterns,
Noticing.
right?
Yeah.
The patterns in my life. The first thing, I always, I relapse long before I take a drink or drug. I relapse with my behaviors,
Mm,
right? So if I'm starting to, and it's happened to me not that long ago, with this book coming out and all the attention and all these things, if I start to seek validation and attention and approval of others outside of myself, then I know I'm close to a drink or relapsing. Because if I'm not getting the things if I'm not accepting life on life's terms, right? If I'm mad that people aren't answering me, and I'm getting that, like you said, that self-worth from outside of myself, then I know that starts to happen. So I think that's important for me to have that self-awareness and to recognize that. Secondly, I build up a network of people around me
mm,
before that I have, that if I really need somebody, there's people I can call at any time, and I have lots of people that would come help me in a second. So that's important too, to be able to always share that. And that's part of being out there and helping other people and doing these things. You create those relationships and create that network that I never had before. So I have that, which is important, really important for me. But I think the most important thing for me is, like I just mentioned, I accept me for me. I would rather get high and avoid my problems. That's how I am.
yeah.
That's how I will always be. I love it. I love getting high. I don't want to talk about this stuff. I don't like criticism. I don't like those things. I don't. I would rather do it. I'm still that way. I'm always gonna be that way. But I don't have to act that way and be that way, because what happens to me now is when I'm in a difficult time and I think about something, or like, maybe I want to use or something, whatever it may be. The first thing that comes to my mind is the consequences of my actions,
Mm,
of all the people that I've hurt. My first thing is my mom the thought, when if I want to get high, I think about my mom finding me passed out in my car with drug paraphernalia on my lap just 2 weeks after my cancer treatment was over. After I learned I was in remission, my mom finds me, most likely thinking I was dead. Right? Those thoughts come into my mind about all the people, the tornado that I took everybody that loved me through. So as great as whatever those feelings are, they're fleeting. And the more that I'm disciplined, and the less I have those thoughts. But even when they do come up, the consequences are right after, because now I've done it over and over and over again. I know the pattern. I know what's going to happen. I know, hey, alcohol wasn't my problem, right? But I know what's going to happen if I go out and try to have a drink. Maybe in a couple, I can have a couple beers, maybe in one night. Maybe I can do it for a month. But eventually something's going to happen, like it's always happened, where I'm gonna be unable to say no to the guy in the bathroom with the good stuff, or I'm gonna go or something's gonna happen where I get hurt, and I'm gonna go find what I really want. I know this because I've done it over and over and over again, right? So I think pattern recognition and accepting me as I am, and knowing that that's the way that I deal with it now.
yeah, pattern recognition is great, and also that self-assessment, right?
Yeah,
That self-awareness, because and you know the repercussions. So it's
yeah,
when you don't know, you can kind of close your eyes. Nah, not me. I got it all under control. But when you know that you have had patterns of not, then it becomes something different. And that also is a great, like, in your face when you're really comfortable with who you are,
Yeah.
you
Well, it
know.
starts with honesty, right? If we can all say that we're honest with ourselves, but when you're truly honest with yourself, and then you can recognize those patterns, because if you're not, you'll never be able to recognize them, you know. And so there's something even more powerful about not only just being honest with yourself internally, right, but being honest with yourself outwardly, you know, when telling other, right, telling other people. And that's the hardest thing to do. That's the hardest thing to do, is to stand
100%.
up there and admit all your flaws, and admit all those things. And but I've done it so many times now, you know. And I even freaking wrote it in a book, you know what I mean? So um
Yeah,
so
no,
yeah, yeah.
it's hard telling people our flaws, and
Yeah,
but you've built also a very it sounds like uh, you've built a really strong community,
yeah.
around yourself. So you're also behaving differently in so many
Yeah.
other ways.
And if I start behaving a certain way, my family or people around me will tell me in a second. You know what I mean? So they'll know in a second. I've created, that's the beauty about like, it's just back to the pattern recognition, is that once I've recognized that pattern, and I know it about me, then I create an atmosphere around me that protects it in a sense. Right,
Mm,
I create all these traps that are in the way, so that it can prevent me from anything, you know. So because I know who I am, I know what I will do, I know how I'll do it, because I've done it over and over and over the same way, and it's always gotten worse. It's never gotten better. I never started back from zero. I was started where I left off, right? And I have a bunch of not yets that I haven't done, and every time I go back out or do something, or do it again, I check off another one of those not yets. So I know that once you really, and that's what it's all about. It's about really knowing who I am. Once I really know who I am, everything changes, and I'm able to create this safety net, and the support system and people around me. And I think but that's the hardest part of all this, is just how do you really just able to look in the mirror, and just to know who you are, and be and say, you know, I'm okay with it. You know, it's hard. You know, it's hard, and not many people get the chance to face it. I had to face it because of all the extreme things that I went through. You know, and you know, that's my goal, I guess, is to spark that conversation. How do we get to know? Because what it does is it makes everybody else around me better. I mean, it makes I don't hurt anybody anymore, and it makes the people around me better people, and that's all I care about.
Yeah, that's that rising tide lifts all boats, and we're
Yeah,
all better together. Now, you said something that interested me because I always use the word yet also, those not yets.
yeah,
Right? So you could look at it a whole bunch of different ways. How do
yeah.
you see it when you were talking about it?
Oh yeah, well, like, I haven't used a needle yet, right? I haven't
Okay,
sold my body yet. I haven't
okay,
there's all these, like, these lines in the sands that I haven't crossed yet, right? But
right.
I also told myself I was never going to do heroin, right? But when I stopped getting Oxycontin, then that became
You're
the only
chasing
thing
it.
available, right? Because when they stopped making it, so every time I go back and start to use, I cross another one of those lines in the sands.
Okay,
I never been to prison yet. I never robbed from a store yet. I never done those things, but that's waiting for me if I go back to
right. So
using.
you know the dark side of the yet, but see, when I talk about it, I talk about the positive side.
Okay.
So like I haven't gone to I don't know Asia yet,
Okay.
or something like that.
Gotcha.
Things that I want. That's why this yet how when I talk about it is it's almost a promise to myself that I'm going to
Sure.
do it. I still might not get to do it for a lot of reasons, but it's not because I didn't have that hope or idea. I know where my North Star is, and I'm like, all right, I just haven't done it yet. Before I published my first book, I hadn't done it yet, but I
Yeah.
knew from a little kid that that was something I wanted to do. I mean, even when I tried out with baseball, it was something I wanted to see where I could really fit in on that because I didn't know, and then I found out,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it that's where I like to use that yet. So how do you keep yourself motivated in a positive way, not only about all the different roadblocks that to not allow you into the world that you could have gone to? How do you think positive? What are you building eh, going forward?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good question. I think. Well, what I'm trying to do more than anything, if I'm being really honest here, is I'm trying not to work a 9 to 5. You know what I mean? So you know what I mean. Not to something where I'm stuck. I don't. I fear being stuck in and not saying that it's how people live. It's just I'm crazy, my mind, crazy mind. It's that I'm stuck in a process to where I'm not growing regularly, where I'm just going through the day. I don't want to be stuck in that process. And my thing is, I inherited a large property out here in Ohio, about 100 something acre property from my grandfather. It's just beautiful nature. This place really helped me heal when I was really struggling when I moved here 5 years ago. And my goal here is I have a therapy dog who saved my life, and I'm involved in a lot of dogs, and involved in a lot of volunteer work with therapy dogs at hospitals and stuff. And I want to be able to put into this property. I want to have time, and that's the main reason why I don't want to have a job that's consistently all the time, because I want to be able to be out here and spend time out here and build something out here. And I don't know if that's a retreat for people, or if it's a dog sanctuary, or if it's something along those lines. That's what I want to do. And with speaking, I think that I'm able to travel a little bit to make enough money to work, to build this place out here, and not work all the time. So that's my goal. And it's actually really good for me too, because like I mentioned to you earlier about practicing what I preach, I have to do these things every day, because if I don't, then everything that I've worked so hard in these years to create is gone in a second. It's
Mm.
gone. Right. If I choose to be selfish again, or choose to go have a drink, or I choose to do something that impulsively that tries to make me feel better now, then all of this is gone. So, I have that's that's my goal, is to build something out here with dogs, or just to give back in the way that that I was given, because there's a saying, right, is that for me to keep what I have, I have to give it away too, so
Yep, yeah. Well, that's the right, Mark Twain said it, right? You have to find out what keeps you what makes you spark, but then you have to learn how to give it away all the
yeah,
time. And that sounds like what you're doing is you're building, possibly a retreat. But
yeah,
nature really does have that healing part of it, and dogs, being around animals,
yeah,
really, I've done equine therapy and things
okay,
like that. And when you look into those dogs' eyes, no matter what you could have yelled at them, but like 30 seconds later you're like, come here, I love you, and they give you
yeah.
unconditional love, and that's really the important part of that.
Yeah, my therapy dog that came into my life at the hardest time of my life, like I said, I was so mad at the world and everything, and I didn't want to be around anybody, and this dog just didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to be with me, and then that's what I needed more than anything at that time, was someone to love me when I didn't love myself,
Mm.
and that's what saved me. So yeah, no, I want to give that back, and I want to share that with people. So that's my goal, and I'm gonna do everything I can to get it. It's it's not easy sometimes, because I'm trying to do things right. And, I don't get that. I have to like, uh, take back on my own superficial urges, and I'm struggling, financially to get it all going sometimes, and not getting the things that I want, and things aren't happening the fastest the way that I like them. But I have to remind myself. And I think staying through discipline, and helping other people and doing these things is remind me, because I'm constantly dealing with it, because I have this huge ego, right? I want, all those things, that the way that I was, I still am those things, right? I think that's the hardest thing for me to realize, is that yes, I've changed, my behavior's changed, things have changed in my life, and I'm a better person, but I'm still those things. I'm still all of them. They're inside of me, that selfishness and all of that. And like I said, I have to work hard daily on a regular basis. So the hardest thing for me is dealing with that rejection and that failure, and the things not happening the way that I want them to, because you get it if you're a speaker, not
Yeah,
everything
well,
happens.
it's
Yeah,
some of it's a rear view mirror stuff. Like
yeah,
it's a stuff. It becomes smaller and smaller as we walk more
sure,
forward on the vision. I mean, that's why your rear view mirror is smaller than your windshield.
yeah,
Your future should be bigger and coming up with it. Now, you've given us so much advice. As we're tying up the episode, you've given us so much advice and some things to think about. But if you had to give us one more piece of advice, or one advice that you live by, what would that be?
yeah. We talked a lot about the self-worth coming from
Mhm.
within, but I think that's you know helping other people, right? I think that's the most powerful thing that we can do, as people, is give our time to somebody, right? I think it's time, like I said earlier, time is the most valuable thing that we all have, and it's really hard, and I know this, it's really hard, and when you're really out feeling, you're trapped in the prison of your own mind, you're
Yeah.
going through pain, you're miserable, you got all these bad things happening, you're dealing with loss or trauma or whatever it is. It's really hard, to get outside of your own mind and to spend time with other people and to help somebody else. It's the hardest thing to do, but the truth is, it's the best thing for you, because when you get out there and you give your time to help somebody, whether it be a small thing or volunteering, whatever it may be, what it does is it makes you realize that you're not so different. You're not so unique. When you're trapped in your own mind, you're feeling like you're unique, you're different, your problems are different. But when you're out there and you see other people, and when you realize that there's so much more that makes us similar than we are different, and it helps you more than all, you know. And that's what I say when I speak at schools and things. When you get the chance to volunteer, it'll be the best thing that you do, because not only for that person that you help, but it'll be more so for you, because it'll just change the way that you think.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of my talks that I give out is, when you're doing volunteerism, you're really helping too. You're obviously helping the person who's able to receive it, but then we all also are able to receive some of that kindness for ourselves and know that
Yeah,
we're worth it.
yeah.
How can everybody contact you to if you want to speak for speaking and things like that?
Yeah, so my website is www.michaelbugary.com. That's Michael's last name is Bugary. There's all my information on there. Please send me an email, sign up for the email list. I love to talk to you. You can book me to speak there. You can get my book on there. You can get my book on Amazon. The Disease of Me: How Losing My Professional Baseball Career, Drug Addiction, and Brain Cancer Saved My Life. That's available on Amazon. Then I have Facebook, my name, and then Instagram, my first initial, Bugari. Then I even joined the TikTok, as I tell the kids, that Michael.Bugari, and then LinkedIn as well. So I'm on all of them. I'm trying to, don't like it, but I got to do it. So I'm
Yep.
doing it.
No,
So
it's one of the things you want to get out there and get your message out there. And I appreciate you coming on here, Michael, to give your message, and we'll do our best to get it out there as well.
thank you, Dave. I appreciate the time.
All right. And everybody else, as always, want to wish you peace and love as your foundation in life. You start off there, and then when you bring a bat, bring those awesome thoughts and be authentic today. I appreciate it, and thanks so much.